Okay, and you are now live.
Thank you, Aisha. So welcome everyone to this evening's FBS Chat. We are very pleased that we have Teri Pichot with us from Denver, Colorado, a beautiful part of the world. The only reason I know that is I watch American Pickers, Teri.
Wonderful.
Colorado looks beautiful. And hey, son, Moon, my co-host, thank you for being with us. Oh, this is going to be great. So, Teri, I'll start off with, I know your CV is huge, but how did you come across solution focused and how did it make a difference for you?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this chat with all of you. So, my story on how I ran into solution-focused practice was completely by accident. I was originally trained in the 80s as a drug and alcohol counselor in very traditional problem-focused ways. And quite frankly, I really struggled with the traditional way that I was trained because I was trained that professionals were right and clients were wrong. And if the client disagreed with the professional, that was because of their denial, or that was because, that they hadn't yet seen the light. So I struggled with that because I wasn't so sure I was right, and so I tried motivational interviewing and that was better, but it was still sort of a gentler way to say that we are right and the client is not yet discovered the truth. And so I struggled with that as well. And then I decided, well, maybe it's just because I didn't have my master's degree. So I went on to get my master's degree and I discovered there's no answers in that master's degree whatsoever. I'm glad I have it, but it did not answer this question whatsoever. And one of the jobs that I took was on working in a battered women's shelter. And my job was to answer the crisis line in the middle of the night and to convince these women to come into shelter. And when these women would call, oftentimes they didn't want to come into shelter. What they wanted was couples counseling. And then I heard that familiar theme again, that my job is to convince them that I was right and that they didn't know what was best for them. And I hated it, absolutely hated it. And then just by sheer luck, I saw this workshop about how to do couples counseling with actively violent couples. And I knew immediately I had to take that class. Now, I knew it was not politically correct. It was what we were not supposed to do in school and all that kind of stuff. But that is what my clients wanted. And I kept thinking, if I could offer them couples counseling, one of two things would happen. Either that it would work and that would be great, or it would fail. But if it failed, then they would let go of their hypothesis that couples counseling would work, right? Wow. So I went to this class and it turned out it was all about solution-focused brief therapy. And in that class, the person who was facilitating the group said something about that he had a group that would work for free on Friday nights and use a one-way mirror. And they would work with actively violent couples. And I said to myself, I have to be a part of that team. So I went up to this facilitator and he quickly said, I'm sorry, we don't have room. And I just went back to my seat, very deflated. And I thought, oh no, I'm not going to make it in this field. So I went up to him at every break. And thank goodness it was a 2-day class. And at the end, I know I was pretty much begging, but he finally said, fine, you can come, but you need to shut up. And you need to sit behind the mirror and just watch because we don't have room for another therapist. I'm like, that's fine. So I came every Friday night for years and I saw amazing things happen. Now, part of that team was 2 therapists that were friends of some of the Denver therapists. And anytime they were in town, they would join us. And one was this woman, and she was always put in front of the mirror anytime she was in town. And it was magical to see her work. She said, wow, a lot. And she could engage the most difficult person. And then the person behind the mirror, anytime he was in town, he would become the team lead. And he was very quiet. But when he spoke, I feel like I remember everything he said. And my guess is you can guess who those two people were. Steve and Insu. And I remember one day Steve touched my knee because I was sitting on the bar stool in the back, and he says, "You need to speak up." And I'm like, no. You are not messing up a good thing for me. And I didn't say it that way to him, but I said, "That's not our arrangement." And he said, "I'm pretty sure if I say that you can speak, you can speak." And I just ignored him. And eventually I figured out who these people were. And I just was so hooked by how they spoke to people, not just how they spoke to clients, but how they spoke about professionals. And so I started saving up all my money, all my vacation time, and I would just show up in their workshops. Now, I realized that today that would be called a stalker. However, it was like the best education I could imagine. And it became the joke. Here's Teri in Tampa, Florida. Here's Teri in New York City. I couldn't afford to go out of the country, but I would just show up. And I think eventually they thought they might as well just adopt me because they couldn't shake me. And so that's how I got introduced to solution-focused brief therapy. And it's the only reason that I'm still here. I never would make it in the field without it. Probably more information than you ever wanted to have.
No, it's fascinating. So the mirror, Teri, that you're talking about was this in Milwaukee?
It was in Denver, Colorado. We had a team of therapists here that were friends. So Charlie Johnson was Steve DeShazer's best friend. Yvonne Dolan was married to Charlie Johnson. Yvonne Dolan was Insu's best friend. And they lived very close to me. And so I became good friends with Yvonne and Charlie. And then anytime Insu and Steve would come visit their friends, they would have me over. And that's how I just got to know them. And then I started stalking them, for lack of a better term, and just sort of soaking up any interaction. So I spent a lot of time at Insu and Steve's house in Milwaukee, a lot of time at Charlie and Yvonne's house here in Denver. And when I would show up at these workshops afterward, they're like, "Well, Teri's going to come to dinner anyway. We might as well invite her." So they started inviting me to hang out with them afterward. And so, they were so kind to me as a young professional who would never have made it.
Well, I don't know if you can see that, Teri, but Mark, and I completely agree with you, Mark. Mark Matt has written, "So this is how you make us learning people jealous."
It's nothing I deserved. It was definitely something that it was just fate crossing paths and the kindness of Insu and Steve. I think they felt my desperation and that I really respect how Steve and Insu worked, not only with clients, but how they talked about professionals, how they treated professionals that didn't agree with them. And it was something that I've always wanted to be. And they were very generous with their time with me.
So when Steve put his hand on your knee and said, "You're ready to say something," do you remember what you said? Do you remember how scary that was?
Well, I didn't say anything. I didn't know who he was. I mean, I knew his name, but it's like, who's Steve DeShazer, right? So I just shook my head and said, no. Jeff said, "I can't talk." And that's when he said, "I'm pretty sure that if I say you can speak, you can speak." And then, thank goodness, Insu started the session. So everyone's focus went there and I just ignored it. But he started asking me questions behind the mirror and I would whisper the answers back to him. And then, like when we were at dinner, he would start asking me questions. And like, I remember one of the summer intensives that I went to in Milwaukee, because I'm generally an introvert, and early in my career, I was painfully shy. I'm still shy, but I was painfully shy. And so I used up all my people time like in sessions and workshops, and then I need to recharge afterwards. So after the workshop, I was heading back to my room, and he hurried and caught up with me. And those of you who have met Steve, he doesn't hurry, and he like hurried and he's like, "You are coming to dinner tonight." And I'm like, "I guess I am."
Mhm.
And that was the first time that I ended up knowing that I was supposed to just sort of come with them to things that they did. And he made sure, because he and I were very similar in many ways, the introvert, the listener, oftentimes, people would assume things, and he got that about me, and I appreciated that. So he and I had a kindred spirit in that way.
Hey, son.
Yes, I'm just listening in and kind of like imagining like the scene where he's kind of running after you. I
Yes,
love it.
I know. In his little shuffle, right? He was such a kind man. And most people don't know that about him because, again, he was an introvert.
Mm.
But, when I would sort of hang back at a workshop, I would turn and he would be hanging back with me. And he would just be standing there. And he and I sort of related to each other on that. And he gave me hope that I could be successful with the personality that I was given. Such a supportive man.
Sorry, I've seemed to have muted Hasten by accident. Hasten, you can unmute
Oh,
yourself.
I muted myself.
Oh, sorry. Go on. I thought I muted
We don't want you to do that.
I mute Joe all the time, but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to shut up here because I'm so excited. I mean, Teri, my curiosity is always about how we not only treat each other but also teach.
Yes.
In a way that one of the things that I really admire about people who are doing solution focus, they know how to learn. They know how to learn from
Yes.
people. And it's in a way, I think instinctive, they knew. I've never met them. So I
Ah.
think they knew how to learn from their clients.
Mhm.
And that's something that I always am so curious about. As Teri, you just finished summer intensive, or are you in the middle of it right now?
We finished it yesterday, the train
Yes,
the trainers
you did.
part.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you just finished, and oftentimes, I mean, you learned tons from your participants. So I am so curious about what is it that you're learning from hosting these spaces for people to learn. What are you learning about your practice?
Man, I absolutely love teaching small groups. That's something that I learned from Insu and Steve. They would do the big groups, but they always say people don't learn in big groups, right? It has to be small conversations, right? So I really love small conversations, small workshops. And I love that solution focused. We talked a lot about it the last few days about solution focused, if you let it, makes us better human beings, because it's a way of thinking, it's a stance, it's a way of being, right? I can't be curious and think I know at the same time, right? So, and as soon as I go into that I'm the expert, I know, ironically, I'm no longer solution focused. So here I was training the trainers the last 2 days, and we were talking together about how much we don't know and how to use that in trainings in a very genuine way. How to say our best guess and then get curious about everyone else's best guess. And then to use solution focused principles like a measuring stick to be able to measure all of our very good ideas up against it. Does it call people in? Does it assume the best about people? Do we hold people accountable for success? Do all of our answers meet that standard? Because if it doesn't, it's no longer solution focused. And it was just such a fun 2 days learning from each other. And we talked about, we have to be aware of that sign for us. And we're also different about when we go into knowing. So I talked a lot about my husband, so I'm glad he wasn't like listening, because we talked about like, when like, I know when I go into the knowing stance, because like my husband moves something and I'm like, no, it doesn't go there. Right. And so I know that feeling well when I'm like, no, that's wrong. You didn't put it back. And I go marching in there. And on a good day, I try really, really hard to catch it and say, wait, maybe he sees something I missed. Maybe there is a better place to put it. And so I do my best on a good day to go in and say, so what is your good reasons for putting the coffee here? And sometimes he surprises me and he has really good reasons, and other times he's just wrong. But at least we assume the best about each other, right? And, he tells me why he thought it should be there, and I say why I think it should be there. But by looking at our personal lives, then we know how it feels when we fall off the rails of the not knowing stance, right? And I loved that conversation yesterday about how do we know when we've fallen off the solution-focused stance, because we tend to really get good at it with our clients, but I don't think it's on a switch. I just don't think it is. And either I teach solution-focused or I probably am not solution-focused, is how I look at it. And yet I realize there's other ways to look at it. But that's what I enjoy, and that's what makes every class that I teach so different, right? Because I don't know what they want to learn, and I don't know what we're going to discover together. And I don't really have that much of an agenda. I just have the yardstick, right? And when they talk or I talk, we pull out that yardstick and say, how does it measure up? Do we assume the best? Are we calling people in? Are we holding people accountable for success?
And I think, Teri, that was actually, it's so interesting you talk about how it shows up in our everyday, because I have two nephews living with me. It's not even about what you say. You can say the same thing in a very different way. So on my good days, I look at them putting stuff everywhere and I say, so what were you thinking around this? What were you thinking? On my bad days, I'm thinking, what were you thinking?
Exactly.
But Teri, I don't know if you remember, it's maybe more than 10 years ago, I was in one of your sessions at a conference. And I actually made notes, and I still think about it every now and then. You talked about there are different levels of solution focus.
Yeah, the integration.
Yes, I don't know if you remember that, but that was because I was also forming actually as a practitioner back then. And that really became the foundations of solution-focused practice that I learned, because, you talked about how there's a surface level of people who just do it, say it, and they can teach it even. But when you look at their personal life, their stance, their attitude, it's not reflecting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a huge learning for me.
Yeah.
So if you would like to speak a little bit more about that, I would love to.
Yes.
Again, please.
Yes, I love what I call the 3 levels of integration of solution-focused brief therapy. And again, these are things that I learned from Insu and Steve, because they lived it, right? They didn't turn it off. And you couldn't get away from it, which was a good thing. It's like a total immersion. So the first level of integration is when people hear about the tools like the miracle question or scaling, right? And they also hear about the stance, that not knowing stance, the working from the preferred future and working backwards, right? They hear all that and they say, I don't know about that preferred future, because I really need diagnosis. I really need to know about the problem, but I like that miracle question, or I like those scales. So they take the tools of solution-focused practice and they put them in their problem-focused toolbox. That's the first level of integration. The second level of integration is someone who hears about the tools And then they hear about the stance and they say, that's pretty cool. That's going to make a big difference with our clients. So they take both. And they use both with their clients. And when they are done with work, they take off their name badge and they flip the switch and they just live life normal. So in their personal life, they're focused on problems, they're calling people out, they're gossiping, they're assuming the worst about other people. That's the second level of integration. That is probably one of the most common levels that I see, that it's something that you do at work. It's something you do with clients. And I shouldn't say even that it's something you do at work, because the second level integration is something you do in the therapy room. It's something you do with clients. It's something you do when you have this kind of power differential, which ironically we don't have in solution focus. So, and so the third level of integration is when we say, yeah, I want the tools and I want, the stance, and it's amazing with clients. And I'm going to use it with clients. But you know what? I could use that with my colleagues. I could use that when my husband puts the coffee in the wrong place. I could use that when I'm watching the news and people are saying things and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I could use that spirit of thinking, I don't believe in that, but it doesn't mean they're bad people, right? That I may demonstrate and fight for other things, but the people who demonstrate and fight for other things, they're not bad people, right? And that's the third level of integration. That's what I saw in Insu and Steve. That's what I believe has the power and potential to make me a better human being, to help me when a car cuts me off in traffic.
That's
someone
takes, that's a tough one. I don't know about
it,
that.
It is, I know.
Sorry
it is
about
super
that.
hard.
Road rage.
I still think the coffee in the wrong place is the harder one, hey son, but I don't know. Maybe you don't have the issues that I have with coffee in our house. But yeah, that's that third level of integration. And that's what my work is all about, is passing on that level. Not that it's the right level. I don't know. I always teach that people have to choose, and I don't know what is right for each person. I have no idea. Everyone's different.
Teri, I'm just writing notes here that first level is kind of people who are taking it as a skill. And
Yes.
Second one is like people who take it as a stance almost. And third one is like a spirit of focus.
I love that.
That's what you
Super
said.
cool.
Wow.
I love that. Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
We have a couple of questions. Sorry. First one's from Mark. So if someone says that they don't, I think he's forgotten the word like. If someone says that they don't like the idea of tools, what would you say?
Help me understand better what that means. If you don't like the idea of tools.
Mark, if you're watching, please expand on that. But
So-
I've got one. Sorry, Joe. I've got one coming up from beautiful Catalin, who is asking. And the fourth, they just recognised they were starving for this kind of world all lifelong, or even doing it, and they are happy it has a name.
Wonderful. I love it. See, we're learning right now from each other. That's wonderful.
When you went back to your practice after having all these amazing experiences, what difference did it make to your clients and you in your everyday work?
Well, it was wonderful because I was running a drug and alcohol dual diagnosis outpatient treatment center at the time. And I was trying to do it with motivational interviewing, and it felt wrong to me. And so I know that, the question is out there about people who don't like tools, and I don't know what that means. But what I did is when people would come, like my staff, because I was a supervisor, and when the staff would come and say, I'm stuck with this client, I would ask them about, what do you know about the client? I would just start asking from that stance, right? And then sometimes they would say things and do things, and like, you know, I did like the family roles by Virginia Satir and things like that. And I would say, well, did it work? They're like, no. And I'm like, okay. So suppose something did work. They're like, I don't know. What would you do? And I'm like, well, now that you asked. And then I described like the miracle question. And that very first time, that person looked at me and said, that's stupid. And I'm like, well, maybe it is. I don't know. I mean, it is sort of corny. I said, you don't have to use it. You just asked what I would do. And that's probably what I would do. And the person left my office and came back the next week and said, I tried to do the miracle question to prove you wrong because it was so stupid. And I said, okay. And they said, damn it, it worked. And then they would say, what else do you got? And so I would start giving them other little things that I had learned, like scales or difference questions or relationship questions and all of those kinds of things. But all along, my questions were based in the stance about, what is this person's good reason for coming, even though you say they don't want to be here? Why would they come anyway? And I would just ask those questions. And, you know, at the end of the night, because we worked till about 8 o'clock at night, I would just sort of lean up against their door jamb at their office. And I'd say, so what went well in group? And I would ask what worked, and we would start. And eventually they decided I was going to show up in their office anyway. They might as well just come down to mine. So the last half hour of every day, all the staff would come down to my office and we would talk about what worked and where they got stuck. And before long, I could use the words solution focused, but I didn't to start with. I just talked how Insoo and Steve talked and thought. And so I wasn't really teaching the tools. I was just having conversations. And then eventually they said, well, you teach it to us. So then that's when I first started learning about it. And then when we started hiring new staff, we decided we only wanted to use solution-focused practice. So we started hiring for personality. And what I mean by that is very much, Hasan, what you were talking about is that there's a personality or a stance that is a type of person that wants to learn. And it's not a person who thinks they already know, right? So we would hire people who didn't know much about solution focus, because in the universities, it was taught mixed with strength-based or motivational interviewing or things like that. So we would hire people who were just curious and wanted to do an amazing job with clients and said, this is the model we're using. If you would like to join us, you're welcome to join us, but we are only going to use this model. And over the 15 plus years that I was there, we ended up running a pure solution focused team. But my favorite part was not just the work we did with clients, but we used it on ourselves. You know, we didn't put up with gossip. We didn't put up with assumptions about each other. And if we heard somebody say something negative, we would say, well, did they say that to you? And they're like, no, so-and-so said that about them. I'm like, well, how do you know you can trust them? You know, and then we would be very direct. And so that whole concept that we don't take a client's history from another professional and do our work based on that. Why would we take gossip about another professional and spread that on like it was correct when we would never do that about a client? And it was the most amazing place to work. We called it the bubble because all of us sort of lived within the solution-focused bubble where it was a whole different world than you would find anywhere else. It was so cool. And so we ended up writing books about it. You know, that's where we started integrating animals into it because animals naturally do solution focused. My dog never comes up to me and said, why'd you put the coffee there? Never. He's just like, oh, okay, well, this is different. Okay, she must have a reason, and they just sort of roll with it. And if they don't like something, they just move. it's so refreshing. And so we thought they're just naturally solution focused. How do we bring them? And I will never forget, I told Insu one day that I was going to bring my therapy dog and add that to solution focus. And I said, is that okay with you? Because I don't want to mess up the model. She's like, I am happy to have the first solution focused dog. And she got very curious. And then every time I saw her, she'd tell me all about Sarah's dogs. And she called them her grandpups. And that became a really cool bond with the animals.
Wow. You know, Teri, it's so interesting because I also have a dog that you briefly probably saw.
Yes, I saw
It was
her.
supposed to be a therapy dog, but when I actually brought her to the training, they actually said, well, she needs therapy. So,
Don't we all?
but I really agree with you. Some maybe animals too, but some people, they just, whenever I see my dog wake up in the morning right next to me, I always think she is like waking up ready to be loved and ready to love. And what a great way to wake up.
Yeah, and no assumptions, right?
Yeah.
They just take things, whatever's in front of them. They don't assume. I don't think they gossip, but I don't speak dog, so I don't know what my two dogs are saying about me. But it can't be bad because they both are super happy to see me. So it's got to be good.
Can you imagine the gossip in the dog park?
Oh, I know, man. But even those dogs are happy to see everybody. So it can't be bad gossip. It's got to be good gossip.
So it sounds like from when you went back to the bubble that it was more about introducing the approach through conversation rather than saying, oh, look at this. This is what we're going to use.
That's exactly right.
And we hear that so many times from other solution-focused professionals as if it's a dirty secret and I shouldn't shout about it. Why do we do that?
I personally think all the good things in life are spread through attraction, not promotion, right? I always say, don't ever trust a salesperson who won't use their own product, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, if a stranger came up to you and said, this is the best product, you should buy it. Do you trust them? I don't know this person. I'm not so sure. But if they're like, using the product and it's super cool and I love the smell of like the lotion or something like that, I'm like, oh, that looks really cool. That's super cool. Now I'm curious about it. And now I'm much more likely to learn about it. So all the good things in life are about attraction, not promotion. So and in fact, when I first learned about it, I made a lot of mistakes. I got super passionate. And I believe the best solution-focused practitioners are passionate, but letting the passion sort of spill out of us all the time actually can do a lot of damage. So when I would go and I would talk about how this is better than anything that is out there, anything that I've ever done before. And I was running a treatment program. How do you think all the other treatment programs felt? Because I was essentially saying, well, I'm right and you're wrong. You just don't know you're wrong. And I learned very quickly that allowing my passion to spew when people are not curious is actually not very solution focused. Allowing myself to get to the place where I think I'm right and this is the way and other people are wrong is ironically no longer solution focused. And that was a very hard lesson for me to learn. And I made a lot of enemies, like at the state level and with other treatment providers, because they viewed me as arrogant and dismissive. And it took me a long time to really understand the true level 3 integration that yes and, which I think is foundational of solution focused, that someone else can use EMDR and get good results, and I can get good results with trauma, and both can be right. And I should be just as respectful and curious about their model as I would hope that they would be about mine. And it's not lip service. It can't be something that I just say so that I don't irritate people. It's got to genuinely be something I believe. It's no different than the language that I use. I speak English doesn't mean it's better than someone else's language, right? And I've got to look at theoretical models in that same way, that solution focus just happens to be the language in which I do my work. That's it. And I have to be just as respectful at a cellular level about the language other people do their work, if I'm truly going to be what I consider solution focused, which is my goal, which is the level 3 integration. But again, if someone wants a different level of integration, none of what I'm saying is true. And then they can choose.
I'm so glad this has been recorded, because I'm going to have to watch this 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I feel like I'm on training. I'm absolutely enjoying this.
Well, good. I'm enjoying it too.
It's amazing. You are amazing, Teri.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought I could admire anyone more than Hasten, but
Well, we all admire him for sure.
You've topped
She's at the
it,
top of our
Teri.
list. I don't want to top Hasoon.
I mean, from our conversation last night, Teri, we were speaking to Tony Medina, and it was all in Spanish. I mean, but the passion, the almost still having that wonder about clients. Do you know what I mean? It never died with him. And he told a story about a young girl and asking her almost like what would be the best outcome for you, and just listen to what she said. And all he did was, from that, compliment the strengths that he'd noticed. And from one session, it changed her life completely. And I thought, wow, yeah, it's amazing. And it can be really, really beautiful. Are there any clients for you that I mean, there must be many, but is there one that you think, wow, I don't know if this could have gone any better for the client rather than for the practitioner?
Well, there's so many like at that treatment center, because as the supervisor, I had moments, and I love talking about solution focused moments, because so often we look at episodes, and I specialize in working with what I call the grumpy Gusses of the world, the really hard clients, you know, the ones with child welfare, the ones that are on parole for, you know, or probation, teenagers, all the ones that quite frankly have done horrific things. And I like looking at those moments. And as a supervisor, I oftentimes would be brought in or had the opportunity to step in when things went horribly wrong, right? So there was this one client referred over by child welfare because he had chained his teenage daughter to her bed. And I don't know how long she had been there, but it was a horrific story. And it was, you know, all the gossip in child welfare, and as oftentimes happens, you know, when they would refer clients over, they would pass on the history. So now my staff had heard the gossip as well. And so when he came in, he acted just like any client who had been gossiped about negatively. He was angry. He was defensive with my front staff. Sorry, my dog finally moved. I can get a little more comfortable. So he came in very angry, very defensive, right? And my office was right off that waiting room. So I quickly stepped in because my staff, I could hear, were getting defensive. And I said, just take a break. I got this, right? So he's sitting in the waiting room and he's angry. And I sat down beside him and I said, it's nice to finally meet you. And he said, oh, you've heard all about me, I'm sure, about what a horrible person I am. And I'm like, I've heard some stuff. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. And I said, but I want to hear it from you, because there must be a really good reason for what you did. And I'm not hearing that from anybody. And all of a sudden, he starts crying. And he said, I didn't know what to do. My daughter was out sleeping with anyone and everyone. I locked the doors. She got the key. I hired a security firm to put, an alarm system. She found the person who installed it, slept with him, used drugs and alcohol with him, and now he gave her the code. I didn't know what to do. She was going to get killed. I would rather that she was alive and I be seen as a horrible parent. It was such a cool moment. We didn't have any problems working with that parent. All the other professionals he wouldn't work with. But our treatment center had no problem because we believe that there's a good reason. It does not excuse the behavior. It was not okay what he did. But both can be true. People can do horrific, inappropriate things and have a good heart. And this client showed me that. And it wasn't just something that we assumed. He showed me that it was true. And you have to believe it and you have to look for it. And you cannot allow gossip and rumors and assumptions to guide our work with clients or with other fellow human beings. So that's one of many stories of my grumpy besties.
An amazing story, and
I still get emotional when I think about that client.
Yeah. I was getting emotional, Terry. Don't worry. I'm sure Hasan was. Aisha's got no emotion, so we won't go there. But it seems that it's that question, and I've heard you say it a few times now. You must have had a good reason for doing that. So we assume the best in people, even if it's horrible or on the surface a horrible act.
Right. Even people who have murdered people, they have a good reason. It doesn't excuse it. It doesn't make it right. But if you understand their heart, you see the human. And then if you see the human, then you can bring out the potential that is there all along, that they weren't living up to when they did the bad thing, right?
And I can't remember who we were talking to, Aish, but she was talking about Insu with a guy that had nearly killed his partner. And I think the first thing she asked him was, when did you know when to stop?
Yes.
Mad. Yeah.
Powerful questions.
Absolutely. But you wouldn't think of that.
Yeah, you can only think of that if you believe people have good reasons. If we don't believe that at a fundamental cellular level, these kind of questions would never occur to us. But they're powerful.
Yeah. Ooh. Hasan's thinking. Look at her. She's got a thinking thing. She's got a thinking hat on. Because I was going to ask Teri, there was a post I read the other day talking about is it possible to be solution-focused practitioner, therapist, counsellor, and have an ego? Which I thought was quite an interesting sort of way of looking at it. Yeah. How do you feel about that? I'm sure you.
Well, I want to be clear. How are we defining ego? Because I don't want to assume.
I think it's that sort of ego. So if the client doesn't make the changes that they want to see, it's the client's fault, not me as a practitioner, because I have this.
Yeah, I don't think that's solution focused.
No,
I don't think that's solution focused. Described like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember so many times when I was talking to Insu about a case, because I would ask her, I was one of those pesky people, as you're probably figuring out, that I would say, tell me about the times it didn't go well, right? Because I needed to know. And so she would tell me about times that she would talk with a client and walk away and be disappointed in herself. And I said, so what did you do with that? And she says, I have to learn more. She said, I'm sure there would be someone else who could have helped that client, but in the moment, I didn't know how. That to me is that spirit of solution-focused practice, that it's not my fault it didn't work. It's just my level of expertise was not yet sufficient. And that's how I look at it. I think it's very dangerous to ever think the client wasn't ready or the client doesn't want it, because that does not hold me accountable to being successful. It doesn't challenge me to be a better human being. I can do my best in the moment and not be effective in the moment. Both can be true. But if those two facts are true, that I did my best and I was not effective, personally, I want to see if I can make my best better. I want to learn from it, but I don't ever want to look at my client and say it's their fault. I don't know if this is answering anything about ego,
no.
but your description, I can answer that.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's about what can I do better next time, rather than the client was defective.
Right.
And you know, so yeah, makes perfect sense. And it's well, when you put the client in the role of expert, that and if you have an ego, I don't know how they're both compatible.
I don't know. And even with training, like that's sort of where I run into this a lot, is that if somebody says something, a training I did was not helpful, it's easy to dismiss them, right? And say, well, you just didn't understand what I meant.
Yeah.
Or you just don't understand. And I've been really working hard to say, I've got to communicate better. I've got to listen to what they were saying better. I've got to not make assumptions about their words. And to bring that into my work with other professionals has been one of my biggest challenges. But I think it's important because, again, people learn from what they experience from a trainer, not from what the trainer says. And I always say, I want to learn from the people who disagree with me, not the people who see the world the same way. That's where the lessons will come. But it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. I keep waiting for Hasten. It looks like she's going to say something, and I'm waiting.
So no, I whenever I have this habit of talking to myself. So please don't mind me, okay?
No.
Well, then definitely don't mute, because I want to know what you're saying to yourself over there.
Yeah.
Teri, actually do have a bit of wonderment too, that some people actually ask this question about when you have been doing this for some time now, what are you doing that's different than what you were doing before? And what's so interesting about that question for me is, Teri, early on when I first learned about it, the passion took over, and I just went, and I thought I was the most innovative, blah, blah, blah. And now, decades and more later, I realized I am just getting a little bit closer to the heart of solution focus. So I wasn't like going out, I was actually going closer and closer to the heart of the practice. So, what do you actually notice about what you do that might be different? Or,
Oh, there's so much that's different.
Yeah.
So much that's different. Because I've been doing this like for 30 years, as a therapist, and I met Insu in 94. So I'm not good with math, so I'll just leave that to you guys, but again, I love what you say, Hasan, about the passion. It felt good, but it was not helpful. I think when I see like those early days, there was people who got passionate with me, and there was people that got a bad taste in their mouth for the model. And I think that's what too much passion does. It's very divisive, right? You'll get the people who get all lit on fire with you, and then there's the people who get that bad taste in their mouth, right? So I went through that phase, and not fun, and then I went through the phase of we've got to do it militantly, like this is the way, right? That wasn't fun for people around me. I had a good time, but I don't think they did. So I had to like learn that it was more about the stance. It's the thought process. And part of what really, really helped me is when the treatment center that I ran closed down, and then I moved to just training people. I'm not liable for these people. And it helped me to relax, right? Where before they were all working underneath my license, and they were working with some of the hardest clients out there, and they're all working underneath my license. And so that militant, you got to do it this way, was almost necessary, right? Because we had multiple layers of regulation. And so once that was taken away, I was able to like relax into it and really enjoy and appreciate that stance of you can do it your way, I can do it my way, and we can both be okay with that. You can work under your license and be accountable to your powers that be, and I will be over here accountable to my powers that be. And that was like one of the biggest blessings. And so with my training center, that's how I run it. And when I am hired by agencies, I'm a consultant. I love being a consultant because they can, when I leave, they can say, well, that was stupid. And that can be okay. They don't have to do what I say. My staff did have to do what I said. Right. And I love that. Now, of course, I have to be accountable to what I say, but they get to choose. And that's a wonderful thing. And that's allowed me, I think, to professionally mature into that level 3 integration that I really love. And as I've done that, like I've never wanted to be the biggest and the best. I've never wanted to market and that kind of stuff. My vision has always been to attract small groups of curious souls that want to learn what I learned from Insu and Steve. I don't want the focus to be on me. I want the focus to be on Insu and Steve. That's what I learned. That's what I hope I represent. And so less of me, more of the hearts of that in small groups.
And Teri, as you speak about working with small groups and really like this the different experiences that you learn, relearn, unlearn, and all those things, and maybe this is the question for everybody who's listening in too, that what kind of questions do you have about solution focused practice? Like questions that you get asked, or some things that you are forming yourself as you practice or teach? What are some of those questions? I mean, I have so many that I want to ask you, but what are some of your own questions that you have?
I think my focus, I don't know if it's in question form, so I have more focuses rather than questions. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know. But like my focus, my curiosity is always about how can we keep that solution focused. I call it this measuring stick, right? That it's about the stance. It's about the principles. How do we keep that front and center as change happens? How do we remember the heart and soul and yet be all of us individuals? How do we work with the individual in front of us? How do we do that? Like here in the United States, like with school shootings, how do we do that with people who I haven't yet discovered what they're wanting that is compatible with society? I believe it has to be there. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't stay in society. But I don't yet know how to find it. And I don't know if it's because clients like that I may see briefly and then maybe something bad happens. I don't know. Like that treatment program that I told you about, we were the program that stepped in at Columbine. that Columbine happened in my county. We were the county program. So we were the ones that showed up to help those students and staff. And in those moments, I don't know how we could have helped, to be quite honest. You know, my staff rushed down to this church where it was sort of like the gathering place right afterward. And sorry, all kinds of touching memories. And, you know, my staff were there, new and solution focused, desperate to help, right? We had one person approach us. Do you know what they wanted to know? When they could get the car out of the parking lot of the high school. Do you know where all of the students were? With each other. They didn't need professionals. They needed each other. Right? And it's in those moments, I'm sure there's a way to do a good job. I think my dog would have done better. Really? I think my therapy dog would have done a much better job than us solution-focused therapists. Because people would have wanted to come pet the dog. They didn't want to talk to us. But these are my questions, Hazen, about how can I, maybe it's become, how do I become more dog-like? I don't know.
Wow, those
Or
are
clients that I couldn't connect with, right? But I know there's a way. I know there's a way.
Wow.
But I don't know.
What your enthusiasm, your knowledge it's there for everyone to see. What keeps you going? Why don't you just relax and go fishing once a week?
Well, I don't like fishing, so
Hunt rattlesnakes.
the rattlesnakes. See? No, you know, I was thinking, like, I'm getting to that age where I have to start thinking about retirement, and I'm thinking, I want to be like Insu. And what I mean by that is Insu's vision was just dying at her desk. And I don't mean that in a morbid way, right? But she loved her work so much. And like the blessing of the pandemic has been that, because I'm a homebody, I'm an introvert. I like, you know, friendships with a few people and acquaintances in workshops, but then I got to rest my brain. It's too much for me, right? You know, but COVID-19 making me stay at home has not been a bad thing, right? My therapy dog is getting trained, which I couldn't say before COVID-19, right? And yet I am able to interact with people around the world and make friends with people, you know, like Joe and I've never met you before, but I've heard of you. And it's like, what an honor to meet both of you. And hey, son, we see each other just at the conference every so often, right? You know, and so I still get that people need, or like I taught in South Korea and got to see some good friends over there and interact over there and in Japan and all these places, all from this little room. Now I need a little bit more than this little room, I'm not going to lie. But as an introvert, I don't want to go fishing, but I want less travel. I want less, you know, of, I'm just going to say crap for lack of better, more professional terms, you know, the stuff that I don't like to do, right? But I love this. I love conversation. I love working with people who want to be amazing. And I can do that until the day I die. So
well, I can
forget
tell you,
fishing.
Teri, Eve Lipchick is still practicing.
Yes.
In her retirement village.
Yes.
Once a week, she still practices.
Yes, and that is so wonderful.
I mean, we could, and I'm not joking. We could actually do this for another 4 hours easily. Just with me sitting here going, "This is incredible. Hasten thinking, deep thoughts, and you know, and Joe just wow. You've been an absolute brilliant guest. Absolutely brilliant. Any last words from everyone before I wrap up? That was the quickest hour ever.
Did we ever figure out what tool means? I hate to leave a question unanswered, but we never.
Oh no, you actually answered it. A conversation.
Did I?
Through conversation.
Wow.
Yeah, you actually answered it.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Well, this has been such an honor and such fun. Yeah, so I really enjoyed this.
It's been 2 amazing nights in a row. I am so lucky. It's been a beautiful conversation. You brought me to almost to tears a couple of times, and that says something. But
no, to be fair, that's not difficult, is it?
Yeah, I do cry quite a bit. But just I'm going to leave here thinking about things in a different way, and that's amazing. Especially, I think what you've put in my mind more than I maybe doing more than I don't now is when you did this, whatever you did, you must have had a really good reason. I'm really curious about what that is, and it just seems such a basic thing that we forget sometimes. So, and the honour's all ours, don't. Hasten, thank you again.
Yes.
Yeah,
Lovely
Joe,
to
when
see
you
you
actually said
again.
it's such a basic thing, there's a reason why it's called basic. It's the base of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Teri, thank you so much for this, because I feel like you kind of reoriented me to the heart of solution focus again with this conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your amazing questions. And it's so good to meet the two of you and to see you, Hasan. And I hope our paths cross again very soon.
I hope so too.
I agree with Hasten. I am definitely going back to, and Teri, I hope you're going to look forward to Joe and I now being your stalkers.
I love stalkers.
Yeah, because Hasten knows that we do.
I'm already stalking her, so hey.
We're going to be running down the corridor.
Rob Black has just said, you must have a good reason. One of my favorite INSU questions. Great conversation, powerful. Thank you, Rob. So next week, guys, on the 27th, we have an FBS chat with Jesus Mendoza Leon joining us next week with a couple of co-hosts there. And Teri, thank you so much for joining us. Can I just ask that you just stay there for a couple of minutes and we can say goodbye? And Hasten, of course. And to everybody else, we will see you next week. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.